pop culture podcast. My name is Oliver Brady.
And I'm Sarah Ifft, and on this podcast, we look at movies, TV, and books from medieval historical fiction and medieval-esque fantasy. And we talk about what they get right, what they get wrong, and what they tell us about how modern people see the medieval world.
Good. One thing I do want to say is that one of my friends listened to an episode of this week, and he said, Ollie, your podcast partner, Sarah. And I was like, yeah. And she goes, and he said, it's great the way she says medieval ass fantasy.
Oh, no.
At the beginning of the episode. And I went, what do you mean? And she says it's both historical fiction and medieval ass fantasy. And I was like, I think she says medieval-esque. And he said, no, I've listened to it. She definitely says medieval ass fantasy. So...
Well, now I'm going to be anxious about this for the rest of our time recording ad infinitum.
I am the one who edits the podcast. I have never heard that. So I don't know where he's picking this up. But he was like, oh, it's cool that you're just so casual about it. It's like medieval ass fantasy. What we do here, what Sarah does here, I'm just here as a color commentator or something, is we talk about what to get right, what to get wrong, and what it tells us about how modern people think about the medieval past. Now, as I said, I'm only here to have a good time. Sarah, you got some sort of like PhD or something? I don't know. You've mentioned it a few times.
I do. I have a PhD in medieval history, and I teach university medieval history courses. So I decided I wanted to do this podcast because my students keep coming in with all of these things that they think that are very wrong about the Middle Ages that they get from watching medieval movies.
And what sort of stuff did they think? Like, have you ever had somebody come in and ask you about, Miss, when were the dragon times?
I haven't gotten that bad, but I have gotten a decent amount of just assumptions that people are constantly murdering each other based on Game of Thrones. So that's a pretty popular one. And I did actually, at some point last semester, get a question about Jus Primae Noctis.
Which, of course, was a thing, as we have canon in this podcast. Your mom confirmed it for us.
Which, of course, in this podcast, we have discussed as canon is not a thing, and that's what I also told my students this past semester.
Oh, well, we'll see. Now, normally we go straight into talking about the movie, but today we have a very special guest. Sarah, who is our guest?
Our guest today is Tracy Tanoff. Tracy, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little about why you decided to be on the podcast with us and talk about our movie for today?
Yes. Hello, everybody. So I kind of like cajoled Sarah and Ollie to like be on the podcast for this movie.
Forced is the way to describe.
Like as soon as they said they were doing a medieval podcast, I was like, hey, if you guys need a guest for the Outlaw King episode, I'm here. But I have some great loves in my life, and one of them is period drama, and another one of them is Chris Pine. Like he's gonna be in a series this year where he like helps solve like the Black Dahlia murders or something. And like maybe a week after the trailer came out for that, I'm walking into the break room at work and like my butt isn't even in the seat, and one of my coworkers is like, Trace, is that Chris Pine Black Dahlia thing on your radar? So it's like when you have like a personal brand that like everybody knows about, I think everybody knows that like Chris Pine in period settings is one of mine. So
yeah, I was going to say, because Tracy's been on my other podcast and she just kept crapping on about Jane Austen. So I'm just wondering, has Christopher Pine ever showed up in a Jane Austen adaptation?
If they need like an American interloper that like never existed in Jane Austen's novels, he absolutely could. But hey, he did a pretty good Scottish accent here, so he can just waltz in whenever he wants.
They've already had they've already had an American interloper. Her name was Gwyneth Paltrow.
True. What would be your ideal Jane Austen role for Chris Pine doing a British accent?
Oh, he'd probably be like a really good, like one of the rogues, like Wickham or something. Like he has that like like bad boy charm.
The first thing that popped into my head was he would make a great Wickham. Wickham's the bad guy from Pride and Prejudice. Everybody.
Pride and Prejudice, which is slightly too late for this podcast.
So, well,
just a little bit.
If we can stretch it out to the Three Musketeers. Sarah, Tracy kind of gave the game away a little bit there. What movie are we doing today?
So today we are doing 2018's Outlaw King, a movie that is very aggressively not Braveheart.
Just to repeat this, everybody, It's not Braveheart.
This is not your daddy's Scottish independence movie.
It most definitely is not.
William Wallace is like Sir not appearing in this movie other than like an appendage.
Oh, a bit of him does.
Just a bit.
Who are our two main stars, Sarah?
So of course Chris Pine. You're not counting Chris Pine's dick as one of the other major stars of this
Oh,
movie,
yes, I am.
are you? Because that was really just a cameo.
That was all I
want to
heard
say they
about this
hyped that
movie.
up so much, and I must have looked away from my screen for like 2 minutes, and I did not see his dick at all.
It was really underwhelming considering how much they talked about his dick appearing in this movie. Like, not that I desperately need to see Chris Pine's dick, but based on how much they talked about it, I really expected to see more of it.
Yeah, like I was waiting for the reviews for this, like from the festival circuit, and like the first like 3 articles that came out were like, "You see Chris Pine's dick in Outlaw King," and I was like, okay.
When you went into work, Tracy, did somebody just like run over to you, sit down beside you, and go, "Tell us about that dick"?
He did ask me like if I had like heard the reviews, and I was like, well, apparently you see him naked, and he's like, well, he teased it in Wonder Woman. He may as well just show us the whole thing. So.
In fairness, you probably see more of Chris Pine in Wonder Woman than you do in this movie.
I think so.
He's just. Ugh.
Maybe it's that like in every movie he's in from here on, you'll see just a little bit more of his dick.
Oh man, I can't wait for the new Star Trek. There'll be a whole new direction for the thing. I did see a review of it once which said Chris Pine playing Robert the Bruce and Richard the Bruce, which I thought was a quite witty way to put it. We also then have Stephen Delane, Stannis Baratheon himself, as Edward the First. Edward Longshanks, not their Longshanks, Sarah. You get it wrong every time.
Yeah, thank goodness they managed to. In this movie, unlike in Braveheart, they stopped calling him the Longshanks, though they still did not call him the Hammer of the Scots, I think, which is his nickname that makes a lot of sense to use in movies about him being a dick in Scotland. But
in fairness, Chris Pine's penis is in this movie, so therefore there's only one Hammer of the Highland in this place. then we have James Cosmo, an actor I absolutely love. I don't think I've ever seen him in something where he's just not giving it 100%. And he's from Braveheart, and he's in Game of Thrones. He's Jorah Mormont in Game of Thrones. He is Brendan Gleeson's dad. Brendan Gleeson's dad is what I meant to say there in Braveheart. He's just a great character actor, and he does loads of great stuff. I really enjoy his movies.
Yeah, and of course Stephen Delane was also in Game of Thrones as Stannis Baratheon. So we
all love a bit of Stannis.
Yeah.
He's way better in the book. It's not often I say this about movies and books, although I do have certain feelings about Ron Weasley. But Stannis Baratheon in the book is awesome, and Stannis Baratheon in the TV show is like he's a bit of a damn squib.
Yeah, and then there's also stuff that's in the show that's not in the book that I don't know if we should have like spoilers for Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, we probably
right now,
probably
but
not. Just
there's a couple of
case.
particular things that it's like, oh no, why'd you make him do
that? And then we had Florence Pugh, and she's playing Robert's not to spoil what's going to happen in the movie, but she plays Robert Bruce's wife, Elizabeth the Bird.
She's so good.
She's a good actress, and she's starring in the movie with The Rock next year, so I'll definitely be seeing her again.
She also was born in 1996, which makes me feel very old.
That's only 5 years younger than me, and even I looked that up and was like, ugh.
Yeah, that's
so I can imagine how you feel.
Yeah, so that's 9 years younger than me, and it's like, oh okay.
Yeah, whatever. It's like 15 years younger than me. Oh wait, whatever, you and your youth. There are a bunch of other people in this movie. It's actually a well-stacked cast, but they're all character actors. Nobody really stands out. We could probably throw a little bit of love to the way of the guy who plays Edward II. His name is Billy Wolfe, something along those
Billy
lines.
Howe.
And he's Billy Howe, and he's a decent actor. He's fine. He is very over the top in this.
He really is.
I've seen him in another like big movie, like, well, big for me. It was a period piece that like made no money. I've seen him in another movie last year, and I had no idea he was in this movie until afterwards when I looked at the cast list, and I was like, "Fuck, he was in this movie."
They did a good job of making him look different. He was in Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Oh,
He was one of
okay.
the guys in Dunkirk. And what was the period piece you saw?
On Chesil
Tracy,
Beach
do you
with
remember?
Saoirse Ronan.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Good old Saoirse going out there and doing it well for Irish. I watched Mary Queen of Scots this week.
Oh, how was that?
And she's very good in it.
Okay.
Like she's really believable in the character. But the rest of the movie just falls.
Yeah,
kind of
the movie
flat.
is kind of a mess, which was disappointing because I love that director and I love so many people in the cast, and the movie just like didn't really come together.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like it should have worked way better than it did.
Mm.
And some of the elements in it are like Margot Robbie's very good in it.
And she's not in it as much as they like the trailers led you to believe. Like my like my mom and I saw it, and like we walked out of that movie, we're like, Margot Robbie was not in that movie as much as you would have thought that she was.
Yeah, the trailer makes it implies that she is at least 50-50 with Saoirse Ronan.
Yeah.
And she might be in it for 20 minutes total.
Is she Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She's playing Elizabeth. Well, Florence Pugh is playing Elizabeth in this movie. And we're going to go through the movie now. A different Elizabeth. And we're going to go through a recap. And this is the section we call Enumeratio. Sarah, how does this movie start? I bet you, in fact, I'm going to guess that you absolutely love the first 10 seconds of this movie.
So the first 10 seconds of this movie is basically looking at a candle. But while you're looking at a candle, there is opening text that says, "This film is based on historical events," which I read and immediately went, "We'll see, Outlaw King. We will see."
I also like the idea that they didn't say this is based on a true story either.
No.
Like, this is based on historical events.
Real ones, we promise.
Yeah.
So we start outside.
There was some review that was like saying that the story that this is like based on, it was mostly a legend. It's like, A, how can you be like mostly a legend, and B, like, so I love the idea. It's like nothing in this movie like actually happened, but it may have. Like
Wait. Was that Robin Hood? I think that's how the new Robin Hood starts. This is mostly a legend.
The new Robin Hood. I am very excited to see and talk about that movie.
Oh, I'm looking forward to watching.
I have heard so many things.
So, the movie begins outside Stirling Castle, and we have Robert the Bruce and there's a bunch of other Scottish nobles, and they're surrendering to Edward I. So this is clearly after the final battle of William Wallace from Braveheart, right? Because that's when Robert the Bruce would have surrendered. So Robert spars with Edward's heir, that's Edward II. I remember watching this at the time and saying to Sarah, "What is this fight even about?"
Yeah.
It's pointless. It's like, we've once fought with swords as children. We should have a sword fight now with real swords as men.
I also think it was a lot of like, look at our like rotating camera work to like show off our period detailing. Like, because the first, like, maybe, like, 3 minutes after they walk out of that tent is, like, these wide, like, rotating, sweeping shots of, like, all these just men in, like, period clothing. And I was like, well, this is really interesting.
It also, therefore, gives us a really good opportunity to see every angle of Edward II's inexplicable bowl cut that he has.
Oh my god, that thing was so bad.
I have no idea where that haircut came from.
It's a weird haircut. For those of you listening, if you haven't seen the movie, if you picture a tonsure but without the bald spot, it's so random. I don't get it at all. Was this a thing, Sarah?
I mean, it was for monks with the shaved part in the middle. I mean, I actually I looked up a ton of pictures of Edward II, and he did not have hair like that in any of them. He had normal hair.
It's just so it was getting to the point where I was like, bring back the curls from Braveheart.
Yeah.
But at least at this point, he's not mincing around.
Yeah. I'll get to this a bit more at the end, or I don't know, probably here and there throughout. I don't love the portrayal of Edward II, but it is an improvement over Braveheart.
So Edward I then blows up the castle for some reason, and he uses Greek fire to do it because, as they all had back in those days. And then we also find out that Robert the Bruce is going to get married to his goddaughter, Elizabeth de Burgh.
Yeah. So, moving forward. So Elizabeth de Burgh, who, by the way, is I keep forgetting to check if she's actually really Irish or Anglo-Irish, but her family are from Ireland.
Yeah, her dad was the second Earl of Connacht.
Yeah.
So I am 100% certain that she was born in Ireland, so that makes her Irish.
Okay.
But she would have spent most of her childhood in Northern Ireland. But back then, it wasn't Northern Ireland; it was just Ireland. So technically, yeah. But they would have come from British stock.
Right. Yeah. That's what I figured was most likely the case, but didn't actually look it up.
They're her would have been her grandnieces and nephews would have gone on to rebel against the crown about 250 years after this is set.
Oh, good for them.
Did not win.
No, but good
But at
for
least
them
they
for
tried.
trying.
And she's we also meet an English queen. Sarah, what's her name? I didn't quite catch
Yeah, nobody would have caught it because it was not mentioned, and in fact, it took me until an hour or so into the movie to realize who she was supposed to be, based solely on my own historical knowledge, not on any words spoken in this movie. So she is Edward I's second wife, Margaret of France, who, fun fact, is actually the aunt of Edward II's future wife, Isabella, our heroine from Braveheart. But yeah, so we have yet another nameless English queen who just appears every now and then in this movie.
And then we have the first of our, what I would describe as a modern conversation taking place in this movie, where Edward II is talking to Edward I, and Edward I tells him to grow up. This is after the Robert the Bruce sword fight, and his response is, "I have grown up. You just don't like me very much," which is not something I can ever imagine somebody in this time period actually saying.
No, a lot of the conversation in the relationships between people feel very deeply un-medieval. With, in the next scene, the perhaps starkest example of that is in the marriage between Elizabeth and Robert the Bruce, where they get married, but then he sees that she's nervous and uncomfortable and decides to not consummate the marriage, which feels like this very modernist way of saying, like, he's a good guy. He's not one of those boorish medieval men.
I literally wrote that in my notes, too. Like, first of all, I was laughing over, like, the monk, like, in their bedchamber, like, blessing the union. I was like, well, that sets,
Right.
like, that sets the mood. And then, like, and then, like, and then, like, the monk leaves and he gets up and, like, bids her goodnight. And I was like, oh, so this is when we see that he's a good guy because he doesn't rape her. Like, like,
yep.
And then I was thinking about, like, how sad I am that, like, it's like the lowest bar to clear, but I was like, wow, this movie didn't have, like, any threats of, like, rape, like, yay, like, good movie.
Yeah, from a modern perspective, I really appreciate that. From a medieval perspective, it's like, on the wedding night, like, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Especially because they imply that they delay the consummation for, like, 2 years or something, and, like...
If you actually figure out the timing, yeah.
Yeah, like, he would have gotten really familiar with his right hand, like, I'm just saying. Like, he would not have waited that long.
And all of his people would have been like, why isn't your wife pregnant, dude?
Yeah.
It's because she's an Irish whore, that's why. This is we're recording this just to peek behind the curtain. We're recording this the day before we release the Tristan and Isolde episode. So the fact that this is so similar to the first night between Isolde and Mark, which was your way of knowing that Mark was a good dude as well, because he's like, oh, Isolde, I'll never force you to do anything. If you don't want to, we won't have to. And it's the exact same thing Sarah said to me when we were watching that movie is, bullshit.
Yeah, no.
No way it ever went down this way.
Yeah, nope, they didn't do that. They said, come on over here, let me put a baby in you.
God. So the English come down and they're like, right, we have to replace some of our soldiers because you dirty Scots killed a bunch of them. So they're basically trying to conscript locals into the army. And the only one who stands up to them is Elizabeth. And this is the point where all of the other people are meant to, I think that scene is meant to be like, who's this woman? What is she doing? But also, we've got grudging respect for her. And I'm not certain if that was the kind of thing that would have been happening around at this stage. And then Sarah said to me, where's William Wallace when all this is going on?
Yeah, it's very conspicuous how not there William Wallace is. This is also the point where, with Elizabeth, and she starts like throwing a bunch of shade basically at the men, which kind of boils down to basically like, oh, look, like I am even better than all of these men. Which, like, not that there aren't occasional examples of medieval women basically, you know, taunting men with their failures of masculinity, but the whole thing did feel a little bit too, hey, look, it's a modern feminist in a medieval movie.
Yeah, like when they're trying to like conscript a child, like she comes in and says, I know for a fact that he prefers to command men, not children. And inwardly I was like, yeah. And then outwardly I was like, that wouldn't have happened. Like, so.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, it definitely was a like, yeah, good job. But then it was also like, oh, but could we maybe find a way to have her be cool, but in a way that people would have been cool in the Middle Ages? Could we try?
Yeah, and I felt that about like a lot of like her really good moments. Like there's a good moment between her and Robert later after he like sends her out of the room to have like a manly discussion with his brothers. And like, you know, she has like this great speech. It's like, that's great. I don't think that would have happened ever. Like
Yeah. So too bad.
So later on, we cut a couple. It's definitely a time has passed for the next scene. Now I'm not certain how much time has passed, but Robert's coming along and he's dropping in his taxes in a scene which I remember thinking to myself, this is incredibly weird. It's like they set it up that they're leaving his castle and they're going to travel to the town or whatever it is, or they're going to go to Stirling or wherever it is that they're showing up in. And I assumed from the way that they'd set the scene that they were going to be attacked in the woods and there was going to be something about the gold going missing or something. But no, they just leave and then deliver it into the tax collectors. And then they come out to find out that there's a group of people kind of grouped around a square. And what are these people seeing, Sarah?
They're seeing our brief appearance of William Wallace in this movie, or perhaps I should say William Wallace's arm.
Yeah, so it's the dismembered corpse of William Wallace.
Not even all the dismembered corpse of William Wallace.
Well, I'm assuming they sent bits of him to different cities.
Yeah, exactly.
To just let people know he was dead.
That's the point
but
of
I wonder
quartering.
how many arms. Yeah, I wonder how many arms they actually sent around. Because how are you going to recognize it as William Wallace's? So it's like 10 cities in Scotland probably got an arm each, and another 10 got legs each.
So like Saints relics?
Yeah, but no.
When there was like 10 heads of John the Baptist and like 60 breasts of Saint Agatha wandering around medieval churches.
That's because God blessed them all, sir.
Okay.
But so William Wallace is dead, and then Robert the Bruce's dad dies.
I literally was making a joke that they were going to kill off Robert the Bruce's dad, and then they did as I was typing the joke.
It's like so abrupt too. Like they're having this conversation and like you can kind of tell that it's coming because his dad is like getting glassy-eyed and about to cry, and like there's a scene just before that where like Robert is struggling to like vocalize anything to Elizabeth, and I'm like, of course a man shows emotion in this movie, which means he's going to die like a second later.
Yep.
Like...
So William Wallace is dead, Robert the Bruce is dead, so that's basically all of the heroes of our Robert the Bruce are dead. And Sarah did point out one thing about this, is that the decree would not be in English and it would not be written in Comic Sans.
The font was so bad. Couldn't they have tried like a slightly medieval looking font?
It's just so weird. Now Sarah, this is where it came into a little bit of awkwardness for me, because you're going to have to fill in using your extensive historical knowledge here. Why did Robert then decide to try and convince people to go for a throne in Scotland? Was it in memory of William Wallace, or did something else happen to trigger this effect?
I think it was part in memory of William Wallace, but I think it was also because there were riots after the death of William Wallace, and he, I think, kind of starts getting the sense that there would be popular support for it if he decided to push for it. I mean, so I think he just basically decided the time was ripe and he could get away with it, I think, more than anything else.
Because in Braveheart, it's definitely implied it's because he was hot for William Wallace.
Right. I don't think there's that much evidence for that he wants to bone down with William Wallace, although, hey, who knows? I mean, I'm certainly not going to say he didn't.
But the next scene, I think, it's actually very funny because he's trying to convince other nobles to join him in this, like, we're going to separate out and we're going to become our own country again. And he goes and talks to John Comyn, and he's like, yeah, come on, join the rebellion. John basically says, no, you twat. I have no interest in this whatsoever. So Robert panics and kills him.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, it's so shocking. I remember watching it at the time going, what?
Especially because, in particular, he stabbed him in a church, which is a big no-no in Catholics.
Yeah, I literally was watching it, and then I was like, and the scene was like going along, and I was like, damn, someone just got stabbed. Like, it was just like, whoa.
Yeah, and stabbing people in a church is a big deal. They excommunicate you for it, and they did indeed excommunicate him.
So he goes to the bishops and he's like, oh, but I'm a good guy, really. What will I do? And then they basically say, if you become a king, you get to make sure that we're independent of the state, basically. So I'm not sure if that's a win for anybody in that situation, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
And then he becomes declared an outlaw.
He's now an outlaw king. Hey, that's the name of this film.
So King Edward says to King Edward II, and he's right. So he's basically about to plan to go up and crush Robert the Bruce and his rebellion. So Edward II comes up and goes, "Let me lead them. I'll lead them. I'll be the best of the bestest. Let me try it." And so he gets permission to fly the dragon banner, which I'm fairly certain was a real thing.
Yes.
Sarah says it was a real thing as well.
Yes, I looked it up.
And what does it mean?
So it's the war flag, and basically it means that all of the codes of chivalry are irrelevant, so that even if you're a fancy nobleman, they're not going to take you prisoner, they're going to kill you.
Which is pretty badass when you think about it. It's like, we're going to put on the dragon banner, so we're not just fighting for England right now, which would be 3 lions or whatever it would happen to have been. It wouldn't have been back then 3 lions, but that's what it is now. And they would have been saying, oh, well, we're putting up the dragon banner, which means that we can do whatever the hell we want, and we don't have to be knights with honor and respect or anything. They say we're just going to kill all of you.
This is a dumb
English are cunts.
This is a dumb question.
Sorry,
This is a dumb question, but is that what the no quarter means? Just that it's like no mercy, basically? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
that there are like codes of chivalry that, especially if you're a nobleman, but even if you're, another person in the army, if you surrender, they're really supposed to, then just kind of take you prisoner and eventually, send you back home, and, you'll do prisoner exchanges and things. So they're saying basically we don't have to do that, and even if you surrender, we reserve the right to just kill you anyway.
Oh, that's lovely.
Exactly. Right? Tracy, do you watch Game of Thrones?
I've seen the first season. I never went beyond that. And from what
I've heard, so I'm glad I didn't spoil Game of Thrones earlier.
Yeah, no, I believe me, I'm like surrounded by people that are really into it, and I'm not. But I'm like, you can all do you. I was kind of out when Sean Bean got killed, but so.
Well, the whole idea of quarter is what is why Jaime Lannister is held prisoner in the first season. It's like there's no reason for them to actually do it. There's no strategic value to having him. No way Tywin was ever going to give him up. So it was just basically like they weren't allowed to kill him because he was a nobleman. So if he dies in battle, he dies in battle. But once you capture him, he's in a cage and you have to look after him and feed him and keep him right. Which is there's a bunch of conversations like that in it. Like, and that's based on how it would have been back in this time.
Yeah.
I have a real I was going to say a real nerd boner for that stuff. But I do remember reading the rules of chivalry a lot when I was a kid. I was like, oh, this is really cool stuff. Like, it's fun.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Also a good example of how there are limits and restrictions on medieval violence.
Really?
Except when you fly the dragon banner.
So the dragon banner's for. It's like, If I was walking up to the shops, I'd fly the dragon banner. It's like, put it up. Get out of my way, peasants. Now, this is also where I think after the Chris Pine penis scene, I think this is the most famous scene in this movie, which is when Edward II, in a bid to inspire his men to go do stuff, holds up 2 swans that he's wrung the necks of, and he's like, "By the blood of these swans, we will conquer."
So watching this, my initial reaction was basically like, what the fuck are all these birds doing here? However, as I will discuss in more detail later, this is a real thing. And actually, to be honest, maybe I shouldn't have been as shocked as I was, because it's so fucking weird that I kind of can't imagine anyone thinking to make it up.
Yeah, it really isn't the kind of thing where you'd be sitting and you'd be like sitting down writing and saying to yourself, I need something to inspire people. What about he grabs 2 swans and holds them by the neck?
Right, exactly. It's just like one of those things that's like, oh, it's so weird. It must have really happened. And in fact, it did.
I just love that there are like details about this movie that like someone is obviously really proud of their research and made them happen. Like I read a book once. It's like about a woman that like time travels and gets stuck in like the Jane Austen era, and it was like there was this really like cringeworthy moment where like she gets her period, and it was like the author just put it in there to show like, I know how women in the Regency dealt with their periods, and I was like, ugh. And like there's that moment with the swans, and then there's a moment that really made me laugh where apparently at some point during the movie they're having a conversation and there's artichokes on the table, and if you look at the Wikipedia page, there's a segment about the historical accuracy, and there's maybe like 11 like short paragraphs of like really legitimate things that like the movie either got right or wrong, and at the very bottom it's like, there are artichokes on a table at one point and these weren't introduced to the British Isles until like such and such. And I said to my mom, I was like, I really want to know who it was that like what Wikipedia editor like saw this movie and looked at the artichokes on the table and was like, that's fucking wrong, and like ran for the book to like prove when the artichokes were coming into the British Isles.
Oh yeah, that person's name is Sarah Ifft.
I was about to say, so I mean, I missed the artichokes. I did not notice the artichokes and therefore did not think to like look into the artichokes. But since I did spend like half an hour doing research about oysters after watching Robin Hood, I feel some kinship with artichoke person.
Oh yeah, the text messages I was getting during Sarah's revelations into the oyster world were, it's like, Ollie, you'll never guess what. I'm like, you're right. I will never guess what. What is it? What is it, Sarah? That's not how they would have prepared oysters back then. I was like, what?
I found a recipe.
And it sounded like a very good recipe too. So we move on, and they are obviously going to have a battle. Robert is there to meet the English army at a place called Methven, and he challenges the English commander. Now, we've already seen Robert lose a one-on-one sword fight. Now, he wasn't particularly invested in it, but he's there anyway. And the head of the British army, or the general, is called Aymer de Valence, which or Valence. How would you pronounce that, Sarah? Valence. I know you probably pronounce it Catalan.
I would just probably say Valence, because I think we're at the point where we're kind of moving into the like weird Middle English pronunciations, and so you're not going to do like a proper French pronunciation. But as colleagues, I'm ashamed to admit to some of my colleagues, my Middle English is a bit rusty. So I'm not 100% sure, but I would say Valence.
It's not one of my top 7
I was going to say, damn, Sarah, I'm so disappointed.
So Robert the Bruce challenges him to a battle, and Aymer's played by a British actor I have a lot of time for. He's just a perfect asshole of an actor, because he just looks like an asshole and he acts like an asshole, and he's gruff and he's angry. I don't think I've ever seen him be a good guy in anything. And he agrees, and he's like, yeah, whatever, yeah, well, I'll meet you at dawn tomorrow. And obviously, you know, he's a very trustworthy British person, but he's flying the dragon banner. So that means there ain't no chivalry. And what happens to these ever so happy-go-lucky Scots who are having a party in the woods?
They
a
all
party
die.
where Robert the Bruce. Wait.
Yeah.
Is this the one where Robert the Bruce finally bangs Elizabeth?
Yes. The most unrealistic thing in this movie is that Elizabeth comes from their sex with no foreplay, and she is presumably a virgin, and the whole thing takes like 2 minutes.
So you say unrealistic. I'm like,
Come on now, he hasn't had sex in years.
I'm like, bang
Right,
on,
I'm
100%.
not surprised
That's how it goes down. Like,
is that what they tell you?
it's every time. Like, it's how it works.
I mean, yeah, I'm not surprised that he's really quick, since, you know, it's according to this movie, it's been like 2 years for him.
Tracy, were you disappointed to see Chris Pine finish so quickly?
I will say I was kind of like, the sex scene struck me as like surprisingly like evenly filmed. Like, you see probably like equal nudity from both of them, and that was like a nice surprise, I guess. Again, like,
yeah, no, that's true.
Again, like, as I said, a very low bar for things to clear, and I feel bad being like, oh, good job, movie, for not being like gratuitously exploitative of this poor girl. So
right.
I know sometimes I come across as a little bit of a prude, right? But I would have been happy to not see any of the nudity. Like, I don't get this is a larger conversation for another podcast maybe, but I don't understand why a movie like this requires nipples and ass shots.
Yeah,
right.
Like, it genuinely doesn't. I mean, you could do not to go back to Braveheart, but you could do that. Here are our shoulders.
Right.
We are clearly in a loving embrace, and then cut to the next scene. I don't need to see two people having an orgasm to understand the two people had sex.
Right, we can figure it out.
I will say that one thing I really liked was that there was like really like genuine like warmth and affection between them to a later ridiculous extent at the end. But like that was really
Tracy, they're actors.
Like, that was like really nice to see, despite it being an arranged marriage. And something that I really liked that we didn't mention before is that when the monk has left their bedchamber and like, you know, and Robert leaves Elizabeth and doesn't consummate the marriage, there's a woman and a man that have been like sitting nearby, and they're like, and like the man is like, well, that was quick, and the woman's like, well, you would know all about that, wouldn't you? And I was like, oh, like, you know, we have like a bawdy woman in one of these like male dominated period pieces, and like that was pretty cool. And it was, and like Elizabeth, you know, I agree with you, Sarah, that it's unrealistic that she comes in like 2 minutes, but like she actually gets to enjoy
whatever.
She actually gets to like enjoy the sex, which was nice. And I was like, Elizabeth was sadly like the only woman ever in this movie, but like at least when there was like one other woman, she got to have like a bawdy one-liner, which like you wouldn't get very often. So like, again, really low bar for these things to clear. But I was like, I guess if I have to have like non-entity female characters besides the main one, I would want them to have like a little bit of a personality that way. Right. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and, you know, I will say that compared to some other movies that we have watched for this podcast, cough, Tristan and his old cough,
God, don't even start.
They do a not bad job of developing the relationship between the two of them, and they actually have chemistry. The actors have chemistry.
Yeah, and like they show her like interacting with his daughter, who we haven't mentioned and that the movie almost forgets about, and like, you know, they have a really
the movie definitely forgets he has a daughter.
And they have like a really
By the end, she is not.
Yeah, and they like throw in a line at the end to be like, "Remember, he had a daughter." Like, you know, and I was like, "Oh, that was just bad." So.
Well, just after he's finished having what I would have said was just a perfectly normal sexual experience with a lady for the first time, over in 2 minutes, everybody's happy. There's a surprise attack by those nasty English, where they fire those very famous and hard to avoid night arrows, which are just regular arrows fired at nighttime.
Flaming arrows, as I wrote in my notes.
Shout out to Timeline.
Night arrows, you know, regular arrows.
They're night. They're so hard to avoid. They're just regular arrows.
Please tell me that you guys are going to cover Timeline.
People. Oh, we've already done
God.
Timeline.
I remember like really enjoying that movie, but I know that movie must be the worst if you're like actually a
Oh,
historian.
yes.
Yeah. So, and the night hours are super effective. The Scottish aren't paying attention, and they're basically destroyed at this point. Now, you're talking that they might have had a massive army of 6,000 soldiers. I would say they're lucky if they escape with 20 to 30 men in this. Now, Sarah's written down 12, and I think 12 might be how many are left after the next little section, which is one of the most inexplicable things in
Wikipedia
history.
said something like 40 to 50, and I think that they say like 40 in the movie, but they say 40 when there are definitely like 12 people on that beach.
So. Yeah, I think this is also the scene where there's like a thing happening with boats, and I just got completely lost as to what was supposed to be happening, and like at some point I was like, is Robert the Bruce running away from the battle?
Yeah, and like somebody dies in a boat, and I think it's supposed to be like a big emotional moment, and I was like, I don't know who this person is.
Okay, I was there because this is when I was still awake for this part of the movie, right? So what happens is Robert the Bruce and his 40 men escape, right? And they slink off into the woods, and they're on the run, right? And they get to a lake, and they look across to the other side of the lake, and they see that there are boats, right? So Robert the Bruce swims across the lake, and then rows back a couple of boats, right? And his men are sitting waiting on the shore because they're gonna row across the lake, right? He goes back over for another boat, right? So because they're the best swimmers or whatever it happens to be. I'm not sure what the situation was. So he goes back over, and as he's coming back this time, he sees the English.
Yeah, they get ambushed or something. Yeah.
And they ambush the Scots for a second time. So he's not running away from the battle. He's trying to get back as fast as he can to get his soldiers who are sitting on the beach because they're sitting ducks with the boat. So he'd gone over to the other side of the lake to get the boat, and he's coming back. And the guy who gets killed and everyone's really sad, etc. That's Robert the Bruce's brother.
Oh.
Yeah. You mean one of like the multiple men with like long hair that like looked completely the same?
Yeah, and he takes a spear, a very well thrown spear, through the back of his head while Robert the Bruce is just about to pull him onto the boat, and he has to kind of like let him go into the water.
So he loses both brothers then, or one of the like two brothers that was with him at the castle, and then there's like a separate brother that they get sent off to. So there's three brothers, and Nigel is for some reason he looks way older than Chris Pine. And I'm not sure why he wouldn't be the next in line, but so Chris Pine has sent Elizabeth and Marjorie off to live with him in the original Robert the Bruce estate.
Right, Marjorie is his daughter, who he mainly forgets
Marjorie's
exists.
his daughter. Yeah, and then the other two brothers are with him. One of them dies in the original battle, I think, in the woods, and then the other one gets killed on the lake here.
Yeah, and I have to say, I love sometime it's during the coronation scene where they're like listing, like daughter or son of like whatever, and it's like Robert the Bruce, son of Robert the Bruce, son of Robert the Bruce, and they say Robert the Bruce like twice or three times, and I was like, okay, we get it.
Oh my god, stop. Yeah, I also just do want to point out at this point that in this movie that has exactly 2 named female characters, there are about 15 named male characters. In fact, so many that even though they are technically named, it is impossible to follow which one is which.
Oh, yeah.
And they all look like dirty
I have
Scots.
this problem with like movies with like dudes in like armor or uniforms. Like Dunkirk, great movie. Could I tell you who the fuck was who? No. Like, nope. Especially once they put the helmets on, I was like, well, I just lost any hope I had of keeping track of anybody. So,
just as a little side, and I'll leave this in. I saw Dunkirk, and then my uncle saw Dunkirk, who was a soldier back in the 50s, right? He was a soldier with my dad, and he didn't fight in World War II. I think he joined the army in 1948, 1947, something along those lines. And he said that there's one thing that really annoyed him while he was watching Dunkirk. He said that not a single English soldier that he ever met in his life had a haircut like that. And all of them have these floppy Brill cream haircuts, and he said that wasn't something that was around back then. Like that's like you see it in movies all the time, but most of them had a regular.
Wow, do you
buzz
mean
cut.
that in World War II
Because
nobody looked like they walked out of One Direction?
you see, yeah, but it happens. Because Harry Styles, isn't it? But it's not. It's just that it's the a lot of men would have had it in the time around London or whatever. Because there's pictures of my dad from the 40s with a big pompadour kind of style haircut and the slicked across thing and slapping on all the Brill cream or whatever. But none of them in the army would have done it, because how do you look after it while you're you're walking through the streets of Paris getting shot at by Germans?
Yeah, you can't carry all that cream with you. That's not part of army rations.
Yeah, nowadays you'd have some hipster soldiers going, "Oh my God, I have to make sure that I get my Brill cream with me." Whereas back, what do people use? Is it Dax wax now? People use.
I don't know, but I
for
I
full
was
disclosure,
say,
people
you're
who
asking
are
two
listening,
ladies, Ollie.
Ollie does not have the hair that requires some sort of waxing.
I will say though, as a woman with curly hair who travels a decent amount abroad, really bringing out the hair product necessary to maintain a complicated hairstyle, that takes up a lot of space in your luggage.
Yeah, I imagine it does, and by imagine it does, I know for a fact it does, Sarah Decker. So at this point, so Chris Pine, they manage to escape, and they look really like haggard or whatever, and they go off into hiding. Edward II wants to find them because that's what he was sent up to do. His dad specifically said, "Go up and kill him." And this is going to be another example of a failure as far as his father is concerned. So he goes to the original Bruce household, and he's talking to Nigel, and he's like, "Where are they?" And Nigel's like, "Oh, I don't know where they are. I never saw them. What are you talking about?" And they tried to run out the back, and obviously they'd sent soldiers around the back in the cotton to bring them back in. And for lying to him, Edward does the perfectly normal and natural thing that would have happened in the medieval times. He just disembowels them in front of the entire household.
As you
and
do.
I think he sets fire to the house as well.
Oh, does he?
I think it's that. I think that's what happens. But it's it's been a few weeks.
There's a lot of shit getting caught on fire in this movie. It's really hard to remember.
And as Sarah has reminded me here, Edward II has some sweet ass gold armor.
He does.
Yeah, I have to say that as much as the stabbing earlier took me off guard, this was like way worse.
Yeah, you see some guts in this scene.
This was like the most graphic disemboweling I've seen since Shaun of the Dead, which is a fucking zombie movie. Like, this was just like entrails like slopping onto the floor, and I was like, ugh.
Hello, entrails.
Yeah, it was a real like this is a bad CGI kind of move. Like I don't know if it was CGI, but it has that look of. So for anyone who's ever watched like a medieval set fantasy movie, this is the kind of stuff that you'd see when a dragon's fang gets slashed across somebody's stomach, and you're like, oh, there's some entrails falling out. One thing about Edward in this scene is that he's constantly going, "You will respect me," in a really weird way that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's this weird like sniveling kind of trying to prove his masculinity thing going on, which feels honestly like a just slightly more veiled essentially homophobic commentary on his masculinity than what we see in Braveheart. So I'm not a fan.
Yeah, it's not a good look.
No.
So Marjorie gets taken and she gets sent to a nunnery, sent to a convent. She's going to learn to be a nun, and she gets thrown in. She's like, you respect me. The nuns aren't going to respect you. They're going to tell you to shut up.
I am annoyed, honestly, that I think this scene between Elizabeth and Marjorie might technically pass the Bechdel test, and I feel like this movie is like so not great on gender that I'm almost annoyed that it manages to hit that bar.
Elizabeth is told is it her dad who comes in?
I think so. There are so many men.
So her dad would be the Earl of Ulster, Richard de Burgh, de Burgh, and he comes in and he says, "Please sign this. It's an annulment of the marriage." we'll set you up with a new family. And I actually genuinely thought this was a good scene because it looks like she's about to, and then you can see her weighing it over in her mind, which is I think she genuinely comes to the conclusion that if she signs it, they're just going to kill her.
Yeah,
at some stage
and she
anyway.
realizes that
So
she realizes that if they feel threatened by her, that there has to be like Robert has to be winning, and like there's like just real like joy in her voice when she realizes that like he's alive and he's doing well. And like it like Florence Pugh is like really great at that. Like you see that she's like so happy, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so happy for her, even though this movie has done like nothing to earn me being happy for her.
It's like, oh, good for her.
Yeah, so while this has happened, we get a couple of scenes of Robert the Bruce and his 12 men getting faced down by a bunch of Scottish men in the Highlands. And they finally get through. The Scottish men are like, no, we would literally cut you to pieces, but we're going to not do that right now. And you can tell they're like, this is a really tense moment. It's actually done quite well. And then later on, actually, sorry, that was earlier. Those are the men who attacked them on the beach. So they pass through and then they come through. So it's not the English, it's the other Scottish who are aligned with the English who do that. But then there's one where they go out to islands. I'm assuming it's the Shetlands. And they go out onto these islands and they ask the people on the islands to give them or to look after them, and they stay there and rest to heal their wounds before going back and taking up guerrilla warfare.
And there's another like great moment from a woman that this movie like weirdly doesn't deserve but does anyway, but I think it's Angus is one of the men, but like they his ginger friend. They land on the beach and like Angus's wife runs up to him and is like, where the fuck have you been? And like she actually like drops an F-bomb and is like, you know, yelling at him that like he was gone for like 4 months instead of like 4 weeks. And I was like, that was another moment where it was like, you don't really get women like being allowed to be vulgar in like movies in general, not just like, you know, period pieces. So I was like, okay, like this and the premature ejaculation joke earlier like just deserve a little bit of respect.
Yeah, it's like, all right, like good for you.
I think I could definitely be wrong. I think that actor who plays Angus, the red-haired lad, is Will Scarlet in the Robin Hood with what's his name?
Russell Crowe?
We covered it.
Robin Crowe.
Russell Crowe. Yeah, Robin Crowe. Yeah. So I think he's playing Will Scarlet in that movie.
Oh, I cannot picture either of them, so I'll take your word for it.
He's just like a skinny yet wiry looking.
I enjoyed looking over the cast list for this movie because like you have some like the names that we named before, but like none of the names we mentioned are like you have like the regular like English actors, and then you get into like Mick Ardle, Mick Dougal, Mick, you know, like, and then like they had to get like the requisite like Scottish actors, and so they like pulled in like 5 of them, and they're like really stereotypically Scottish names.
It's like we found them.
And we. So they're constantly going around killing Scottish people and killing English people, and more of the Scots are joining them because they want to get their hand at killing the English, and they take to killing people in churches.
That's how they got started.
Definitely not what they're supposed to do. Yeah. But they seem to really enjoy it, and it's good because they're getting loads of people in it. And then I'm going to let Sarah and Tracy talk about the next little bit where Robert takes a bath in the river.
Yep, Robert the Bruce takes a bath in the river, and you very briefly catch a slight glimpse in the distance of Chris Pine's dick.
Do you mean, as I said before, the scene that I completely missed when I must have looked at my laptop for like 2 minutes?
Yeah, it's like, so, you know, as I said before, like, I'm okay not seeing Chris Pine's dick. Like, that's fine. I don't mind that I didn't get a great shot of Chris Pine's dick. But for as much as they talked about Chris Pine's dick, I expected more than a slightly blurry distance shot for approximately 2 seconds.
Yeah, it was like 85% of the press for this movie, and it was so like minuscule that I looked away and missed it. Like, that's how like
it's like, really? That was it?
Yeah. Like...
It's a blink and you miss it, dick.
This is some poor choice of words from both of you. It's like, it was so minuscule, I missed it. And, that's all it was? Like,
for the record, when I said it was so minuscule, I realized as I was saying it that was a poor choice of words.
what I genuinely thought was going to happen, you know, when they were having sex for the first time, I thought it was going to be like a full on,
Same.
here's my
Yeah.
penis going in.
And
And
then I was
then I'm
like,
like,
where'd
I'm
it
gonna
go?
see it. No, I didn't see his dick. And then it's like literally, I'm in the water and everything. And when you think about it as well, it's really
Yeah,
gratuitous.
like one of the
Yeah.
first like nude scenes that I can recall with a lot of clarity is when I was 12, Orlando Bloom was in Troy, and he has this like nude like this sex scene, and you see him, but like it's not the sex scene, but it's like he's standing up, and it's like you see him like completely naked from the torso, but like where his dick would be is just like completely like blocked like out of the shot. So like they managed to block like his crotch area, and then you just see like the rest of him, and that obviously made an impression on young Tracy. And like and like that's one of the first scenes I can remember, and like I could have seen them doing like something like that, but like you said, like full frontal, and like that just didn't happen. And like if they wanted to get their point across that like he's a man and like this is his dick, like they could have easily done that, and they did not. So
But it was just weird that it wasn't in the
yeah.
sex scene. It's like,
Like, why do we need the
like, if
naked
it's going
bath
to be-
scene at
oh, sorry.
all? Like, we could have just skipped that entire scene. That scene was
100%.
only there to
They-
show us Chris Pine's
And they
dick.
try.
it's 100%. That's it. It's like, here, take a look at this guy's dick. He signed off to say
They
that we
like
could do it.
tried.
So we
They
might as well
tried in
put
the
it in.
early press to like defend it. Like they were trying to say like this is an important scene to like show his like masculinity and his power. And if I can find like one of those articles, I'll like definitely send it to you guys. But like they really try, like because it got so much attention like on the festival circuit. There's definitely just like entire interviews devoted to defending why his dick was in this movie. So
But-
yeah, like the
but I
first.
get
That
it
was
if-
literally the
oh,
first
sorry.
thing I heard about this movie. It was honestly that I think actually our former guest on Gildenmeister and her husband Benjamin White were watching. I guess like I don't know, an interview on some late night talk show with Chris Pine,
Mhm.
and she just messaged me and she's like, "Oh, have you watched the movie with Chris Pine's dick yet?"
Yeah.
Because that's what the entire interview
that's-
was about.
yeah, it was.
That's all it's
It, like,
ever going to
wasn't
be about.
like the press wasn't about the movie at all. It was just about his
No.
dick. Like it was so sad.
But we've probably committed as much time to talking about his dick as anything else in this movie as well. And it's just because it's so random. Like obviously I was talking about being a prude earlier, and I'm not against flashes in movies. Like I what did I watch recently? So there's a movie called The Raid, right?
I'm
Which
familiar.
is, you know, a horror. Yeah, it's a great movie. Now there's a scene in that where one of the dudes is getting changed, right? And you're like, he's getting changed. It would be like if that happened in that movie, like this action movie, which has nothing to do with
Right.
naked men, and then so he's like, "Now I'm naked. Here's my dick. I'm gonna have a fight." Like, this is it's as gratuitous as description I would give it. It's like, what's the point? It's like, here we have a naked man. He's a big, strong, tough dude. We're also going to show you his dick for a second, and then he's gonna then the next scene is not connected to it. I genuinely like if it was in a sex scene and it was there, and you're like, fine,
Yeah.
this makes perfect sense. But at the same time, if you watch something like Excalibur, which I'm assuming we're going to do for
We
the
are
movie, for the
obviously going
podcast
to.
in the future, there's so much gratuitous naked ladies in that movie.
But then the dude has sex in full armor.
and the dude has sex in full armor. So it's just like it's great to see some sort of
Yeah.
readdressing of the balance.
Yeah.
It really is, and so I'm not going to begrudge the movie for doing that. I just wish that it hadn't been focused on like this is a major thing, and if it were going to focus on as a major thing, actually
Yeah,
have
like-
context to it as opposed
Yeah.
to here's a
Yeah,
naked
like
dude
I was
standing
gonna,
there.
I was
And-
gonna say, like
yeah.
if it has to be nudity, like I would much rather it be male nudity, but like either like
Right.
show it all the way or like don't bother. I guess like if
Right, yeah. And like I will say, like, you know, to some extent, like, good for them for, you know, doing male full frontal nudity when like female full frontal nudity is almost the norm and male full frontal nudity is very rare.
Yeah.
Like, hey, good for them for doing something different with that.
And I know to
But
I know that, like, to a degree, I think he's really okay with it, because I think he basically said in Wonder Woman that, like, in Wonder Woman, like, there are scenes where they just, like, treat him like a piece of meat, and he was, like, fine with that. And, like, I think he's, like, really aware that, like, you know, he's gonna get looked at in that way, and I don't think he's, like, offended by it, like, which is good, like, kudos to him for, like, being okay with that. But at the same time, it's like, why was that even there? So.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing about it as well is I don't think a scene like that needs to, like, when you were saying people are defending it as like it's a real sign of his masculinity and stuff like this. I don't think a scene like that needs, like, a lot of movies I've seen which have sex scenes in it, a lot of times straight after sex scene, like you were talking about the Orlando Bloom scene, right? Like, when you actually look at the imagery of that, it's Orlando Bloom. I know the scene you're talking about because I really like the movie Troy, right? So Orlando Bloom has sex with Helen, right? And he gets up and he walks away. She's lying exhausted on the bed, and he's walking around showing off his magnificent body, right? And like, genuinely, it's a real look at me and how much of a man I am kind of moment, right? It's the same with Brad Pitt. There's a scene in this, like, I think it's maybe about 5 minutes after that in the movie, where Brad Pitt is lying in bed and
and he's, like, fully nude,
and he's fully nude, and there's two women with him who are still asleep. Because, and the implication is that Achilles is getting up and going off the war. These two women who don't have to do anything are still so tired from what he'd done to them the night before that they're going to sleep through a battle. And it's one of those moments where you're like, yeah, it's great. I get to see Brad Pitt's amazing torso. He really obviously worked out for this movie. But do we need to have this implication that this man is so manly that the women have to sleep on? And that's when people are defending the Chris Pine scene as it's a sign of his masculinity. That's just more of the same problem that there's been in medieval movies and fantasy movies for
and
the
there's,
last
like,
50
ways
years.
to illustrate masculinity that, like, aren't literally waving your dick around.
And also, like, okay, if this scene is about his masculinity, I feel like the dick wasn't really impressive enough to have accomplished that.
Oh my
like,
God,
you barely
Sarah
see
Decker.
it.
Now, because you're an expert in this, we've already established our difference of religions. Did you check out whether Chris Pine was cut?
You really can't see well enough.
But I didn't you say you got the special HD 4K TV and you paused it just to make sure?
No, I did not. I could not tell.
So,
I could not tell from that blurry glimpse whether or not he was circumcised.
I think that we've talked about his dick like 30 times the amount that it's actually in the movie.
We definitely have.
So, we then move on. So we get to see a glimpse of his dick. Did we mention his dick? But we get to see a glimpse of Chris Pine's penis, Richard the Bruce, and then we move on to the battle at Loudon Hill, which is when the English and the Scottish meet, and it's pretty much going to be the decisive battle. He's been going around doing his guerrilla tactics and building up an army of the disenfranchised Scottish. And because he's having victories, more and more of the people who had just turned their backs on him earlier in the movie are now joining him. If you were to believe Braveheart, all he had to do was walk up to him and say, "Do this for William Wallace." In this movie, they don't talk about William Wallace. Or, "Do this for my love, William Wallace."
They don't even throw one sword inexplicably across the battlefield.
I really wanted to see that. I wanted to see a sword get thrown and then just land. Right? But so he's gone around collecting them. Edward I dies at this battle, and Sarah said that it's basically he dies of dysentery. So he crapped himself to death.
Yep.
Take that, long shits. I mean, long shanks.
Hammer of the shits.
So, hammer of the shits. So Edward II takes over, and he doesn't bother, like Sarah said, he doesn't bother to tell anybody. He just kind of walks out, and now I'm in charge, and everyone seems to understand that that's how it's going to go. And Robert the Bruce tricks the British into attacking them on, first of all, stodgy ground, so the horses wouldn't have been able to get up to full speed. And then, second of all, they used the large spears that was seen in Braveheart to kill a lot of them. And then when the soldiers fall to the ground and when the enemy infantry come in, they can't move as fast or as well as they can, and the Scottish men are able to basically cut them to pieces, and the English start to retreat, and then for some reason Edward II decides to come running forward at Robert and have a duel with him.
I hate this scene.
I believe you love this scene. Is that not how you said it
No.
before?
Like, so this is again this like, it's this weird like him trying to prove his masculinity thing, and it feels very much like, look at masculine Robert the Bruce and his penis, and now look at like failure of masculinity Edward II. And, you know, given the fact that reportedly Edward II may have been gay, it just felt really gross.
Well, you can tell he was gay because we don't see his penis in this movie.
That's true. If you don't see him having a penis and or fucking a woman, then how would you know he's not gay? Or berating a gay man like Edward I does.
So just for those of you who haven't seen it, if you're listening, he attacks Robert and loses, even though it's basically the same repeat of the fight we had at the very beginning. Robert knocks him down, takes his sword off and kicks it away, and then Edward is basically sniveling and crawling around on his back and still shouting like for respect and
like, I am the
calling
king.
for people to come and help him. I'm the king, I'm the king. And it's like, come on, there's no need to do this. Like, I am 100% certain this did not happen.
It didn't.
Yeah, and then even if it had have happened, once Robert has beaten him, he lets him go. He just like, go back to your army.
I mean, it's nice that he didn't kill him, but like, these people have your wife and daughter, and in reality also like several other of his relatives hostage. Keep the dude and trade him.
It's just like to make Robert look like unnecessarily like magnanimous, like he spares them, like look what a good guy, like again after like, oh, he didn't rape his wife, look what a good guy, like, so
yeah. But like then it's like dumb because it's like, oh cool, I'm just gonna let this guy go and like fuck my wife who's still like hanging in a cage somewhere.
But it's the exact same thing as William Wallace in Braveheart, who on 2 separate occasions trusts the other Scottish nobles not to walk off on him on the battlefield. So the first time it happens, he's like all shocked or whatever, and then in the climactic battle, the exact same thing happens, and you're like, how did you fall for it again?
Fool me twice,
and that's
shame on me.
But that's what's happening here. He lets Edward II just walk off. Because, Sarah, like, tell me what would have happened if, let's just say this duel had have happened, and he beats him and Edward II's lying on his back. What would have happened if Robert Bruce had have cut the head off the King of England?
I mean, if he'd cut the head off the King of England, well, honestly, that's a good question, because I'd have to double check. I'm actually not sure at that point who the heir to the English throne would have been. But
see, what I'm imagining at that point is that they would have had a war of succession.
Yeah.
Because he's the only son of Edward, isn't he?
I'd have to double check that. I'm not 100% sure that's the case.
I'm not 100% certain either, but I think he might have been. So at that point, then you're looking at cousins who are all putting forth claims to the crown. So the best possible scenario for him in this is cut the head off him and then let the English sort themselves out at home.
I mean, if he wants to be like chivalrous and magnanimous, he could not cut off his head, but take him prisoner and then say, okay, I get to dictate all of the terms now because I've got
dictate.
I get to decide all of the terms now because I have your king.
Yeah, or cut his hands and feet off. No, wait, sorry, that's probably bad.
Jamie Lannister style.
Jamie Lannister style. Yeah, even if he did cut his head off, he could just say, we were under the dragon banner when it happened.
Right.
Because that's, like, literally the dragon banner is in the background in that scene. So
yeah, so he really makes the worst possible choice of what to do with Edward
just letting
II.
him walk off is just ridiculous. Yeah. Also, he goes walking off. If I was some enterprising random Scottish soldier on the battlefield, I'm going to cut his head off.
Yeah, seriously.
I think we didn't even mention the fully mention the cage, did we? We just mentioned it before, but I don't think we mentioned it the first time.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
You mean Elizabeth's cage? Right, we'll get to that because this is just a thing. So he lets Edward, that's the end of the main storyline between the Scottish and the English. The Scottish win, and then we get our epilogue. And the epilogue starts with Chris Pine coming down on a horse onto this beautiful, pristine, perfect beach. And then
that I guess he owns and no one else is allowed to be on.
It's so weird. It's so large, and I have no idea what's going on. And then another horse comes up at the far end and drops his wife off. And as Tracy just mentioned, his wife had been kept in a cage for the last unknown amount of time. But I can't imagine that entire campaign didn't take at least a year to 2 years.
Yeah, so we'll get to more about the accuracy of this in a subsequent section, but first of all, just a couple of notes. The epilogue begins, eventually Elizabeth got released. There's actually text that goes across the screen. Eventually, by the way, is 7 years after that battle.
Whoa. She was in that cage for 7 years.
We'll get to the question of the cage, but based on this movie, yes, apparently.
Yeah, yoga with Adrienne has nothing on her.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like, how would you... what happened to Marjorie, do we know?
I think she was released at about the same time as Elizabeth. Not that we would know that from this movie, because at this point they'd clearly just forgotten she existed.
They throw in, like, the clunkiest line where, like, they, like, mention Marjorie, like, just to establish that he didn't, like, completely forget about his daughter.
Right, but in this, like, cinematic, like, the two of them running to each other across a beach scene, it's like, hey, where's my daughter? Oh, shit, I forgot.
Yeah, and there's, I mentioned it when I messaged you guys, but there's, the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, when it's in the States, has this, like, ending that's very, like, 16 Candles, like, that's literally what it's styled after, where, like, Elizabeth and Darcy are, like, outside, like, kneeling on, like, a balcony in Pemberley, and they, like, are making out, and he's saying, like, you know, when I'm, like, in love with you, I'll call you, like, Mrs. Darcy, and it's, like, this really, like, tacky romantic ending that, like, people are super bothered by, and, like, I don't, like, it doesn't really bother me.
That, of course, they did for the Americans.
Yeah, like, it doesn't really bother me in that way. I don't really, like, you know, get, like, prissy about it in that way. Like even when it's Jane Austen, but like here I saw this scene and immediately was just like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's just like this like this so like tacked on romantic ending. Like, it really feels like they screened it for like test audiences and it ended at the battle and people were like, but what about his wife? And they were like, oh shit, and they had to like film this like romantic ending to like tie it all up. Like, it feels like it's from a completely different movie. It's so random.
I'll tell you what it reminds me of, and Sarah, you'd probably remember this because we watched this together as well. In Mission Impossible 3, right, there's this mad, crazy running scene through the streets of a third world country, and then his wife saves him at the end, and then he has to finally come clean and admit that he's an international spy.
Right.
And then it cuts back to him in the IMF offices, and it's him and his wife walking hand in hand down a corridor, waving at everybody. So it's like, it's been like this mad, crazy action movie, and it finishes with a Disney ending of them walking down and everyone saying, goodbye, Ethan, goodbye, Jenny.
Have fun on your honeymoon.
Goodbye. Have fun on your honeymoon. That's exactly what it is. Have fun, guys.
Yeah,
and
so that was
it's
a really
like
dumb
Ving
scene.
Rhames is in an office, and you're like, what is going on? And that's what this is like. As for the Pride and Prejudice movie, for those Americans listening, so you guys got that sappy ending. In Europe, we got the hyper masculine ending where Matthew McFadden's Darcy just stands up and says, "Here's my dick." Just wait. It's only there for a second, but you know he's the man. Like, it's brilliant. Oh, such silly stuff. But that's the end of Outlaw King.
So it is.
And now we move on to our next section, which I cannot wait for this. This might be for our avid listeners. This might be the longest set of Vera It Falso that Sarah has ever prepared for us. So I'm just going to sing in and then sit back and get educated for the next several hours as Sarah tells us what the movie got right and what the movie got wrong in the section we call Vera It Falso.
You did that one really well. You really shouldn't replace it.
Definitely replacing it. So Sarah, what did this movie get very?
So, this movie actually did fairly well on a decent amount of things. There's a couple of things I wanted to especially highlight. So first of all, I just wanted to give some respect quickly to our poor nameless English queen, Margaret of France. Although she does go completely unnamed and ignored and never speaks. She did, in fact, accompany her husband on several Scottish campaigns, so her physical presence is accurate, though in real life she might have spoken or been referred to by name. Also, while I could not find the exact age of this particular actress just by eyeballing the two characters, I think they did get about right the charming approximately 40-year age difference between Edward and his second wife.
Edward's second wife is 40 years older.
Younger.
No, I'm joking. He was
which
so
also
old.
Definitely makes her like younger than his son, which also, again, like looking at the actors, at least like looks about right. Which charming. I also wanted to highlight the church stabbing episode. So Robert really did stab John Comyn before the altar in the church, and there's actually a big debate about exactly how this went down. So the Scottish sources are basically what this movie is basing it on. So the idea that the whole thing was kind of sort of an accident, or at least a kind of like sudden panic move or something like that. Whereas the English sources, who are trying to make Robert look bad, say that he lured John into this church under the assumption that he would be, protected by laws of sanctuary, and then, premeditated stabbed him. So, obviously we don't know for sure which is true. Both sides certainly had an interest in portraying it the way they portrayed it. Robert really was excommunicated. What this movie interestingly does not say is that he got excommunicated because Edward I actually wrote the Pope and said, excommunicate this guy.
No way.
Yeah, which I feel like they should have included, because I feel like that's cool.
Yeah, that is pretty good. Although I imagine then that would have really showed them how much time had passed in the movie.
Right.
Because nobody's going to believe get this letter to the Pope. Oh, right. Get FedEx in here.
And Edward just got the Pope on the phone real fast.
Yeah, and I think I said this off mic, but to say it on the podcast, one of the problems I had with this movie was that they don't actually establish how much time passes in this movie. And, when you look at Wikipedia, it clearly outlines everything 2 years later, this, and this, because someone actually obviously sat down with the timeline and figured, oh, okay, this is when this would have happened. But in this movie, for all you know, this movie could take place over, a month. They don't establish how much time passes at all, ever.
Yeah, so. They really don't. So, yeah, it could be a month. It's something 7 years, maybe? I've forgotten now exactly what it was, but it's a pretty lengthy span of time, and that's very not clear. But anyway, the other thing is that him being unexcommunicated by the local bishops, whose authority to do that was a bit questionable, but we'll move on from that, wasn't so much that there was this kind of quid pro quo. It was really just that the Bishop of Glasgow was a long-standing hardcore supporter of Scottish independence from England and was buddies with Robert the Bruce. Always good to have a bishop in your corner.
It's always good to have a bishop in your corner. It's even better to have a bishop in their corner because you've just taken a rook. But that's a different thing altogether. So, Sarah, please tell me more about the Feast of the Swans.
Yes. So, this was a thing where they had a feast with a bunch of, live swans wandering around, and then they killed and ate some of them. So this was in 1306, and Edward I used this as an opportunity to knight 267 men, which, as it happens, includes his son, the future Edward II. And, fun fact, Edward's current favorite, who he may or may not have been sleeping with, Piers Gaveston, and his future favorite, who he may or may not have been sleeping with, Hugh Despenser.
Wait, you've talked about these people before,
yes,
Sarah.
On Braveheart.
These are what allowed Isabella to basically get the hump, and her son came back to take over again. Yeah,
that one of the ways she was probably able to win out is that basically all of the lords were annoyed at the extent to which Edward was giving favoritism to, at that time, Hugh Despenser. And so that's why they basically like backed her in this.
So are swans a thing? Like, are they seen as a lucky bird for some reason?
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember actually the exact symbolism of swans. They really like birds. A lot of birds have symbolism. They're really into
They
birds.
liked them so much they had to kill a bunch of them.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's not like pelicans are Jesus, so like pelicans are special. But other than that, like,
Sorry, wait.
Back
whoa.
up. Pelicans are Jesus.
Let's just go back here again. Now I know we've just talked about this before. We've already mentioned this podcast. We come from a different religion and stuff. But please explain to me again how Jesus is a pelican.
So now I'm just explaining your religion to you.
That's what I mean. I need to know.
So symbolically, according to a number of medieval texts, the pelican was a metaphorical representation of Jesus, basically because they were a little off on how pelicans worked and were under the impression that pelicans pierced their own breasts and fed their infant little pelican babies their blood.
Oh my god.
Like Jesus.
I love that they were just a little bit off on how pelicans work.
That's exactly how pelicans work. What are we talking about? It's. I can't imagine it being any different to this. Swans are associated with the She over here in Ireland, like the old religion as we would call it. And it's sort of associated with gods. So, for example, even the children of Lear got turned into swans, and they were a king's children who got punished, and they were like these beautiful creatures, and then he was going around killing them and eating them. So he was actually inadvertently eating his own children, which is like just a weird story.
Yeah.
But there I think it's like even now at this point, I think it's the famous story or the famous anecdote that the only people allowed to eat swans in England are the royal family. So like they're seen as the queens or whatever who happens to be in charge, so it's the queen at the moment, but the queens she owns all the swans in England and nobody else is allowed to touch them, which is strange because deep down I kind of want to know what a swan tastes like.
Like, it's only when you realize you can't eat a swan that you realize you really want to.
That's exactly it. So you want what you cannot have.
Yeah. Also, I just checked. Apparently, sailors in the Middle Ages considered the sighting of a swan to be auspicious. And also, the song that it sings right before it dies is the sweetest of all. So the swans really should have sang a really great song before they wrung their necks.
These people must be listening to different swans than me because I grew up beside swans. I've spent my entire life beside swans, and it's all hissing and.
It's also a shout out to my fellow medievalists. They will also be familiar with swans as making not super nice noises, though maybe if they died, they'd make better ones. The big medieval conference every year is held in Kalamazoo, Michigan, on the campus of Western Michigan University, and there are swans that live there. And every year, at least one medievalist, I think, has like a little bit of a run-in where they're genuinely at least worried they're going to get attacked by a swan.
I've always heard that swans are assholes, I have to say.
Oh, swans are huge dicks.
Swans are definitely not Chris Pines. They're huge dicks. I said I've grown up with swans all my life. As long as you stay away from swans stay away from you. I'll tell you one thing is people always go, swans are so strong. They could break your leg or break your arm with a single swipe of their wing. Bullshit. If you have your arm broken by a swan's wing, then you, my friend, need to go to a doctor and talk to him about your vitamin D deficiency, because it's just simply not true. When they're flying, sure, yeah. When they're taking off, maybe they'll generate it. But if you're standing and a swan swings its wing at you, it's not going to break your arm, and you're going to get it and do a King Edward II on it. You're just going to wring that thing's neck. It's got a neck that's 7 foot long. Like
you can get it by that neck.
We can all take down swans. Yeah. Right. Last podcast I recorded, I was talking about taking down dolphins. Let's all take down swans.
Take them down.
That can be our 2019 New Year's resolutions, everybody, because we're recording this in the early part of January. Let's take down the swans.
I also just love that you I love that you have in your notes that the king swore before God and the swans to avenge the death of Coleman. Like, I just like that it's like before God and also the birds that like are dead now, like, and have no consciousness.
Yeah, I've forgotten these birds that I
Yeah,
murdered.
like,
He does say something like, "I swear by these birds."
Yeah, so the actual line was, "I swear before God and the swans." And in real life, that was actually an Edward the First move, not an Edward the Second move.
I just really like that the swans are like equal, like to God. It's like before God and
God
also the swans.
and the swans.
Do you think they asked Stephen Delane to do it, and he was like,
No, I'm not fucking doing that. I'm
No, I'm not
Stannis
doing it. I'm
Baratheon.
Stannis Baratheon. Okay, Sarah, can you tell me about the bombing of Stirling Castle? Because this sounds like something that they couldn't possibly have made up.
They kind of did and they kind of didn't. So what we see in the movie is that Edward, after they've already surrendered, decides to pretty much just destroy the castle. He uses not only a very large trebuchet, but also has in it a missile, lit with Greek fire, so which is kind of probably mostly legendary, though maybe existing to some extent in the Byzantine Empire, though its effects probably slightly exaggerated. But some kind of, chemical fire was, used to light the missile. And basically it kind of looks like they bombed the castle. And like most of the castle kind of goes down. So there was, in fact, an interest on the part of Edward I in making a demonstration of his new siege engine, which was called Warwolf, and which is a badass name.
That is
and so it's just basically just like a really big trebuchet. So he did use it on the castle after the Scots had surrendered, but first of all, there's no Greek fire because nobody in the West had the faintest idea what to do with Greek fire or how to make Greek fire in the 14th century or in any other period.
Yeah, they still don't know now. It's weird.
Yeah, like this is a thing that specifically would have been known in the Byzantine Empire. Like they did not, very specifically, they did not want those Westerners to find that shit out, and they didn't. So that's part of it. And then also, Werewolf really probably only destroyed the gatehouse, so like right kind of at the front of the castle, which makes a lot of sense given that now that he's conquered this area, he would want that castle to remain basically usable. So he wouldn't have wanted to basically just bomb the castle out of existence, which is what it kind of looks like in this movie.
You definitely wouldn't want to just destroy one of your strategic places. So, Sarah, we've talked about what they got right. We've talked about what they got a little bit right. Can you, or do we have time? But can you tell us, what does the movie get wrong?
Yeah, so I'll do a couple of big things. So first of all, we already have talked about it on a number of occasions, and we've talked about this in other episodes of the podcast, the issue of modern feminists and medieval movies. So I'll just mention that again quickly, but move on from it. I think one of the big things I wanted to highlight is that I don't think it does a great job with the relationship between Edward I and Edward II. So I would say really both Braveheart and Outlaw King pretty dramatically exaggerate the extent to which these two just hated each other. So they do have occasional conflicts. There's issues with money. Edward I was not especially happy with Edward's relationship with and favoritism toward Piers Gaveston. But there's no particular reason to think that Edward was anywhere near this militarily incompetent, or that Edward I was really quite so disappointed in his heir. Like, there's really no reason to think he just basically straight up hated his son. So I wanted to mention that. Second, I did just want to note that Edward I actually dies about 2 months after the Battle of Loudon Hill instead of right before. And Edward II, not in addition to obviously not having had this ridiculous duel with Robert the Bruce, was not even at this battle. He was in London and only came to Scotland after hearing of his father's death. So, yeah. So they're not great on Edward I or Edward II. And the other then big thing that I wanted to highlight is Elizabeth's imprisonment and release. So, as we've talked about a couple of times...
She was in prison.
She was imprisoned. She was not in a hanging exposure cage. However, the hanging exposure cage does not come from nowhere. So Elizabeth herself was held in house arrest in Yorkshire, which, probably wasn't fun, but it wasn't that bad. And that makes sense because, not only was she a big deal, but Edward was buddies with her dad, who, regardless of his political affiliations, is not going to love the idea of his daughter being put in the exposure cage. So the person who actually got put in the exposure cage is Robert's sister, Mary, who got cut out of this movie because, God forbid, we have 3 women.
I'm not sure if she got cut out. I think she's with Nigel.
When?
So, when they come to get Elizabeth and... Sorry, this sounds like I'm acting. I'm going to cut this out, right? I don't think... I think that's her. There's another woman in the grounds of the castle with them who tells what's-his-face that they don't know where she is or they don't know where they are. I think that's his sister. That's not Nigel's wife. I think
that
that's
makes
the sister.
Since she has no name and they never say she is, that definitely doesn't count.
That makes the 4th woman in this movie.
Hey.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The reason I'm saying that is because when the news comes of Nigel's death, it's like your brother and your sister are dead.
Oh.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
Right? So that's what I think. So I think that woman. So she's a tall woman in the scene, and she's just kind of standing there, and that's the thing. But I'm not going to cut this out. But you can still say that she's not in the movie. I just thought the first thing that popped into my head is because I was looking up this exact same thing. It was like, didn't he have sisters? Because they definitely talk about his sisters in Braveheart. Right. So like, didn't he have sisters? And it was like, yeah, his sister Margaret or Mary, whatever it happens to be, is in. It's like, so she's in the castle up in like the hereditary home.
Okay.
She never got married off.
Right. So she's the one who
So,
got stuck in this hanging cage for like 6 years or something like that.
That's nuts. How would your back would be like you'd never stand straight again.
No, I mean, I feel really
bad. But when
bad.
you get released, your dress will be pristine, and it will also fit exactly the same as it did, if not better, before you got put in the cage.
And your hair is gonna look amazing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So she was in that cage for, I guess, actually, yeah, about 4 years, I think, because I think they ended up releasing all at about the same time. Elizabeth and Mary and Robert's daughter Marjorie, which was, I think, in 1314. So that's the thing too. And in general, we've talked a couple of times about the fact that this movie is like very vague about the timeline and really elides a lot of things together. So it makes her period of imprisonment seem pretty brief. In reality, it was 8 years in total.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Because she literally looks not like they didn't even bother to put any sort of aging makeup on her.
No. So, they really just kind of move along and they're like, oh, yep, she's good. She's out. So, but yeah, she would have been, in prison essentially, although it was, under house arrest, not in a cage for 8 years. The other thing I wanted to note is that as lovely and romantic as our cinematic scene on the beach is, hostage exchanges are complicated and have a lot of mechanics. And a very important part of them is the constant physical control of the hostages. You don't just, dump the hostage on the beach. You, pretty much physically hand over one hostage and get another hostage back.
Yeah, I also imagine that the king doesn't go down and collect them himself, even if it is his wife, and doesn't go running along a beach where there could be anybody with bows and arrows in the trees to just shoot him.
It's not impossible that the king himself could have been there. I was having trouble finding that many details about that in particular. I would have had to delve just a little bit deeper in terms of actually finding that. So I'm not sure if he actually in particular was there. It's not totally outside the realm of possibility that he could have been. But as I said, it's very careful, and if he is there, it's definitely not just him. It's him and a small army to make sure somebody doesn't just, shoot him. He also, by the way, in reality, did eventually get back his daughter in the same hostage exchange, I believe. And fun fact, the Stuart monarchy, who eventually became kings of England and reunited the two kingdoms, are her descendants.
Ah, excellent. So, one last thing you've written down here. Could you tell us about all the women, independent women, throwing their hands up in the air in medieval movies?
Yeah, that was definitely the other thing that irritated me, is that I feel like Elizabeth spends like a ton of time just really being like, look, like I'm just as good as all these men. Like, look how like brave and equal I am. And like, not that there aren't some like pretty badass medieval noble women, but the way in which she talks about herself and the way in which she presents herself as an equal to men and makes no effort to do otherwise, especially, you know, even coming into a situation where she very much initially would have been at something of a disadvantage, and that she's kind of coming into this place where she doesn't necessarily have a lot of allies. It seems very unrealistic to me.
Yeah, and one thing that makes me laugh is I mentioned earlier there's a scene where Robert wants to talk to his brothers, and so he sends her out of the room. And like, first off, like later he apologizes to her for sending her out of the room. And I'm like, I'm not sure that would have happened, but okay. Like, I do get really annoyed when people are like, that never would have happened, because like I'm sure there were like people that like maybe would have. I just don't think it was very likely.
Wait, hold on a second. But this is a guy who didn't rape her on her wedding night. Of course he would have apologized.
Yeah. And then like she has like this really great line about how she's like done all this reading, and and she like, she is, expected to be a political figure, and like she has this like this line about how like she's like done all this reading and she's like come to form like her own ideas of like men in power, but like that's a speech that like I don't think she would have got further than like 2 words into without being told like shut up and know your place. Like it's just like it's like a great speech like in general, but like would it have happened?
No.
I don't think
so I feel like there are a lot of those moments in this movie.
Yeah. And I mentioned this when we were messaging yesterday. It's I almost wonder if it's like kind of on the director, because like it is absolutely on the script too, but the director did a prior movie with Chris Pine I alluded to earlier, a really great like modern western called Hell or High Water, and Chris Pine and Ben Foster are brothers that their house is going to be like foreclosed on by the bank, so they go and like rob the branches of the bank to like get the money back and everything. And it's this really like great movie, but it's a modern movie, and like this is, as far as I'm aware, this is the director's first period piece, and I sort of wondered if he was having trouble like adjusting to the genre, because a lot of the things about this movie just feel like it's just a very modern sensibility, and it's a lot of the same themes of Hell or High Water. There's a lot of, masculinity and power in Hell or High Water. It's, money, this is the crown. But it's like a lot of the same themes, but it just still feels too modern and Outlaw King. And I just wondered if like part of that was just because like he's not used to making a historical film. Although I do think that a lot of it is the script. And another thing I said off mic was that this got cut down after the festival circuit. I think it was originally like 2.5 hours, and now it's like just like a minute over 2. So they definitely lost like half an hour, because I think it got criticized for being like a little bit muddled. But there's also a rumored like 4-hour cut of this movie somewhere.
That's like, and so like, much Outlaw King.
There's nothing. Yeah, there's like nothing about this movie that I think would have been fixed by having more movie. Like, it's just like it probably would have just made it worse. So like, as entertaining as that might be, I just don't know if any of the problems with it could have been fixed like without someone that like really knew the era like looking over the script and being like, okay, this needs work. So like he might get better. Like, I'm not gonna like say that I think this man is like hopeless. Like, I think this was like a decently competent movie, and you've confirmed what I had heard, that it's like a pretty accurate movie, because one of the first things that I heard people saying about this movie was like, shit, it actually looks to be like really accurate, and there's like not a ton to complain about. So like he did like a good job, I think, on the accuracy front. It's just that like as a sensibility, I don't think it quite
I think that's very much a good way of thinking about it, is that clearly like somebody for this movie did a decent amount of research, and a lot of it gets kind of very meticulously then placed into this movie. But despite that, the sensibility, as you said, it feels very modern, and it it feels very much like the kind of thing that you would get with somebody who doesn't really know anything about the Middle Ages, but who read some books of like basically kind of military and political history. And so they kind of got some like points and some beats right in terms of facts and kind of little details here and there, but that it just doesn't feel like the way people interacted with one another in a medieval society.
Yeah.
It's
like the military and political beats are right, but like the culture's
exactly.
not.
And I just don't think they read any social or cultural history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can respect that he's a good director. I've seen a few of his movies. Startup is a good movie. Hell or High Water is a very good movie. And this is a good movie. It's well directed, but you can only shine a turd so much. And the problem with this is all in the interactions between the people, which don't come across as real. Even
I would say other than like Robert and Elizabeth, who I think like have a genuine like warmth and affection between them, but I think that's because of the actors.
Yeah, so they have a warmth and affection between them, which is great. They are good actors, and he's a good actor, she's a good actress, or actors, whatever we want to describe them. But the problem is that all three of us have agreed, or I do agree, and mostly I just listen to what Sarah tells me, that the interactions between it that we see would never have happened.
Yeah.
So the director has chosen to show him saying, "No, I'm not going to sleep with you on the first night." The director, and that's like, oh, this shows that he's got respect for her and he's not a bad person. He wouldn't have waited for 2 years to let them build up a relationship. So like all of that stuff doesn't make sense when you're watching the movie. So yes, it's well directed and he's set that up, but at the same time, you're still sitting to yourself saying, in a realistic sense, this would not have happened. And even the way they interact with each other, like that whole apologizing for sending her out of the room, it's more likely he would have walked in and said, "Why would you open your mouth like that and embarrass me? Like you were making me seem like I am the weaker person in the relationship because I'm letting my wife speak for me."
Right. Like that's the kind of thing that, really, especially if in his position where he's very much kind of trying to establish himself as an important person, as a potential claimant to the throne, he really would not have wanted to get that reputation of his wife telling him what to do. I mean, that's the kind of thing I feel like that, honestly, like Eleanor of Aquitaine can kind of pull off that shit. Like this woman can't pull off that shit.
Yeah, well, Eleanor Aquitaine pretty much did run 2 kingdoms at various
and
points.
also led all of her sons in rebellion against their father. So
good, because her father was a nasty man.
Yeah.
So we better get on to our next section because we've been talking a lot. We nearly talked about that as much as we did about Chris Pine's penis, which is a tongue twister in and of itself. So the next section is where we talk about one person from history. And I noticed this. I thought Sarah was going to talk about Robert the Bruce, but it turns out I was wrong. This week's Historia et Veritas is about Robert the Bruce's corpse. Do you like the way I did a little bit of jazz interpretation on the et Veritas there? It's just like I'm trying to change it up.
So, okay, if the penis is Richard the Bruce, how would we refer to his corpse?
Oh, I don't know.
Zombie the Bruce. Rob Zombie.
Bruce. Rob Zombie, perfect. That's brilliant.
Yes.
So, I could have actually just talked about Robert the Bruce and, things about his reign as King of Scotland and all that. But instead I came across some fun stories about what happened to various parts of his body and after he died and decided to talk about that instead.
Tell us more.
So, one thing that I think is awesome that a bunch of medieval kings did is that they decided that they wanted different things to happen to different parts of their corpse. So they had certain chunks of their body cut off and divvied up and sent along elsewhere. This is something medieval kings did, and you also see this happening with various figures who had the kind of reputation for sanctity as well, who got divvied up into relics. So Robert the Bruce, in particular, said in his will that he wanted his heart to go on a nice little vacation before its ultimate destination of burial at Melrose Abbey in Scotland, and specifically that he wanted his heart to go on crusade to Jerusalem. So he left his heart entrusted in particular to his friend James Douglas, who is one of the many men I lost track of in this movie who really liked killing English people.
James, he's played by Kick-Ass, who's also Quicksilver in the Marvel movies.
Nice.
Aaron
Taylor Thomas, yeah.
Well, after the death of Robert the Bruce, that dude got his heart in a nice little metal chest for him to wear as a necklace. And instead of going on crusade to Jerusalem, he went on the cute little mini crusade to what is now Spain, so against the Muslim kingdom of Granada. And in a surprise kind of ambush attack, basically he ends up getting killed in battle. And according to legend, when he's like being attacked and is about to get killed, he takes off the heart in an urn and throws it at the guy, shouting, "Lead on, brave heart, I'll follow thee." His attacker does not seem to have been dissuaded by this and killed him anyway. And Douglas's remains, along with Robert the Bruce's heart in an urn, were brought back to Scotland, where the heart was buried at Melrose Abbey. However, no one actually bothered, marking where the heart was buried. So in 1921, somebody basically dug it up, said, I wonder what this is, and then put it back. And then in 1996, they dug it up again, at which point somebody did some science and figured out that indeed it contained some human remains from approximately the correct period, and based on that, reburied it now with an inscription saying that it is the heart of Robert the Bruce.
I just want the inscription to be like, "This is the heart of Robert the Bruce," parenthetical, we think.
It's very poetic.
It's bound to be. It's somebody's heart.
I think it actually says on the website for the Abbey or for somewhere else, there's no reason to think it's not the heart of Robert the Bruce. It's definitely somebody's heart.
So what happened to the rest of his corpse?
So the rest of his corpse was buried at Dunfermline Abbey at his death in 1329. And he bought a really, really fancy white marble tomb from Paris to cover up his corpse. During the Reformation, however, the Protestants decided a fun thing to do was to go into churches and break shit, so the tomb got destroyed. In 1818, they then started digging around and found a vault which had a skeleton covered in cloth of gold and nearby a bunch of fragments of marble and alabaster. So based on this, they're like, okay, cool, we found the tomb of Robert the Bruce. That's exciting. Eventually, they also looked at the corpse itself and saw that the sternum had been sawn open, which is what you would do if you're going to remove someone's heart. So that also is, additional evidence that this is likely to be the remains of Robert the Bruce. Since then, they have had a lot of fun with Robert the Bruce's skull. So they did pretty much immediately, they did a bunch of very kind of high quality casts of the skull before, reburying him. And based on the casts, there have been a bunch of attempts to do facial reconstructions of his skull. Now, when they were doing these facial reconstructions, one of them, or at least one of them, actually did two different versions. The version for if Robert the Bruce had leprosy, and the version for if Robert the Bruce did not have leprosy, because a big historical debate has been whether Robert the Bruce had leprosy.
But we all know his dad did, because we saw it in that documentary, Braveheart.
Which got it from the younger Robert the Bruce. No. So, very recently, so in 2017, the kind of latest word on the big Robert the Bruce leprosy debate is that based on the kind of original best quality plaster cast of his skull, something about how the bones work are not compatible with him having had leprosy. They would have been in worse shape, I guess, basically, had he had leprosy than they actually were. So, as of now, Robert the Bruce officially does not have leprosy.
Well, I'm glad he's officially been cleared.
It was also a very weird article because it was like Robert the Bruce's name has been cleared, and it's like, chill, it's not his fault he got leprosy. If he got leprosy, it's not like a moral failing.
I was gonna say, like, also that like, doesn't make him
No.
a bad king. Like, dude was chronically
Yeah.
ill. Like, chill out.
So yeah, it was like a very weird
No,
article.
you got to ask yourself, where did he get the leprosy from?
Maybe one of the whores that he probably slept with when he was
Exactly.
waiting to sleep with his
Like
wife for 2
years without getting any of Elizabeth.
Well, or for the like 8 years that she was in prison.
No, they were in love at that stage, Sarah. He wouldn't have, he definitely would have waited.
He would have remained true until they ran
Well,
to
if
each
he was
other on the
waiting,
beach.
I bet he then came even more quickly that time than he did the first time.
Oh my God, Sarah, if Decker.
And that's going to be the poor, like, second time this poor woman has sex, and she's like, is it always this fast?
Well, if she's reaching a climax as well as she did the first time, like, she's probably happy that's so fast. She'd be like, yeah, it's great. Now I can go back to being a
Yeah,
feminist.
because she definitely
have to worry with this, like.
reached a climax in 2 minutes. She definitely wasn't faking.
Listen, let's just move on to our next section where, although that's great to hear about his body, I don't know what I want. I'm going to donate my body to science.
You could send it on crusade.
No, do you know what? Actually, I've done enough for science in my life. I'm going to donate my body to the humanities and see what they can do with it.
They do that sometimes. There was a guy that donated his skull to be Yorick in Shakespeare
No way.
and Hamlet. Yeah,
That's
awesome.
great.
yeah. I need to find the verification for it, but I know that that's actually something that's happened. There was a guy that literally was like, "I want my skull to be used as Yorick."
But you know what? That dude had leprosy.
Jokes on
They're
them.
just spreading it around. Jokes on all those people who had it. Alas, Pierre, why is my hand? Oh no! So we now move on to our next section where we come up with a different version of the movie based on what we would like to hear or see in a movie called Outlaw King. And it can bear no resemblance, thank God, because mine bears no resemblance to this movie. So this week we got, because we got a special guest, you get a bonus. You get 3 other possible better movies. And this is a section we call Fabula Nostra. Which of you two lovely ladies would like to go first?
Okay,
Sarah
I will
can
go first. So, I decided that I wanted to do a combination of. I decided I wanted to just kind of go for it and do some like medieval-esque fantasy, but that I wanted it to be kind of inspired by some real historical events. So, as some of you may or may not know, one of the inspirations for the wars in Game of Thrones between the Starks and the Lannisters is the real-life Wars of the Roses between the Yorks and the Lancasters. He's like barely even subtle about it. So I would like to do my own fantasy representation of that, which is going to be centered on somebody who's the kind of equivalent to Edward IV of England, who was deposed by a Lancastrian ruler. So it's going to be kind of the Wars of the Roses, but they're going to like fight with magic because why not? Because we need more magic. So that's basically my idea for this movie. Yeah, and I want to have Michael B. Jordan in it as our Edward IV. And I would like to cast as his actually somewhat controversial love interest. His Edward IV's real life wife was a widow, and some people had like very strong feelings about this and whether it's appropriate. So I would like to cast in that role Emma Watson. And so he is going to be an outlaw king because it's the period in which he has been technically deposed.
Very interesting. That sounds very good. Tracy, what movie would you make if you had all the money in the world?
I think that for all the talk that it got for being in this movie, that there just wasn't enough Chris Pine dick. So I just want like Outlaw King, like the porn parody. Like just that like sex scene just like ramped up, and like instead of like taking the other castles, he has to like fuck other people's wives or something.
God.
Like Just like lather on that like medieval cuckoldry thing and just let it happen. Because for all the press that moment got, it was nothing. So we just got to lean full tilt into
I feel
this.
like also it would be fun if then like as long as like you're doing that, I feel like it would be nice to have a movie with Edward II where instead of just like doubting his masculinity, they just like made him gay. And so we can also like just have him having like a ton of
that
sex
would be
with some
great.
dudes.
And then he could be an outlaw king because, like, sodomy was illegal or something.
Yeah.
There we
But,
go.
I mean, if it is him having sex with and I nearly said with two dudes, like, we might as well go the full way, right? But if it's just him having sex with another dude, wouldn't that be the ultimate show of masculinity?
Yes.
Because you're getting to see two dicks at the same time.
I mean, they would have said that in ancient Greece.
That's what I'm saying. There's nothing more manly than this. Yeah, I would watch both of these movies. I'm not sure if I would want to admit that I would sit down to watch the porn parody of Outlaw King, but I probably would. Let's face it.
I wasn't brave enough to go looking to see if it actually exists, but I feel like just based on like the sheer amount of talk.
Okay, I'm gonna be brave and I'm just gonna Google it. There's nothing obvious that I'm coming across immediately.
Oh well, it's out there.
Okay, so the market is just
it hasn't yet been made, so you still have the opportunity. If you were fantasy casting it, would it still be Chris Pine?
Yes.
Who else would be in it?
I don't know. I don't know. I think he and Florence Pugh had like good chemistry that just got wasted on like those 2 minutes. So just let them go at it and have fun.
Wasted on that 2 minutes. Okay. All right. So I went the last couple of times we've done this era. I've gone a little bit hybrid. I've been trying to win Oscars, and I've decided that in this one here, it's a movie named Outlaw King has never won an Oscar. So I'm going to give up on my Oscar hunt. Right. So I am going to create a movie which is something that I think a lot of people would enjoy watching in the same way that I would enjoy watching it. So my idea for Outlaw King is going to be set somewhere around about 800 to 900 AD, and it's going to involve a group of Vikings. And these Vikings are going to be played by Mads Mikkelsen, Ulrich Thompson, Michael Nyqvist, Nikolai Coster-Waldau, and let's just say Stellan Skarsgård, right? Now, they're going to come and try to invade northern England. They're going to be coming down doing raids, they're going to be trying to take over whatever stuff. And the rulers there, the lords and ladies, have no chance of fighting against them. They're getting destroyed, getting killed or whatever. But little do they know that living in the woods and the forest out there is an outlaw king, a man who has taken it upon himself to look after the small folk, and that man would be played by Solomon Kane, James Purefoy, and he will have help from his best friend Rufus Sewell, and the two of them are going to fight off against this Viking invasion. So it's basically going to be outlaws versus Vikings, and it's about the Outlaw King and how he comes to save northern England from the plague of Viking invaders. And it's just going to be balls to the wall, ridiculous action.
Awesome. Sounds fun.
And they can give
definitely watch
they
that.
can give us 2 Oscars for special effects. And strangely enough, Max von Sydow for best supporting actor.
Is he a bad guy?
He's definitely a bad guy. He starts out as, I'm your friend. I don't know, you seem creepy. No, I'm your friend. So that's what I would do. Outlaw King, about a leader of outlaws in the woods who end up having to fight off a bunch of invading Vikings.
Nice. So it's like weird Viking Robin Hood.
Like a weird Viking Robin Hood. So basically, think of it as Robin Hood versus the Vikings.
Awesome.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Whoever's listening, make
seriously, I'd watch that movie.
Okay, so now we get down to the thing where we do our summations. Now, we've done quite a lot of summations in this so far, and we've basically gone through it and talked about the director stuff. But we'll give it a mark at a 5 in a section we call my voice broke. Estimatio. Uh, we'll get our guest go first. Tracy, what would you give this movie out of 5, and why?
I'd say probably a 3, maybe a 3.5 if I was feeling generous. But it was competent. It was well made. I just feel not all of the parts came together, and maybe I was expecting a little more of it because I like Chris Pine. I like the director. I thought they did good work together, but I just felt watching it that it just didn't really add up. I just thought that it could have been more. I think they did a competent job explaining the history. The actors were good. It was just lacking something. And I think, like I said, it's not to say that I don't think the director could get better. I think that, maybe if he was to, approach another era and this time maybe do a little more cultural research, he would probably have a good chance at getting it right. I just think that for all that this was hyped, it actually was meant to be an awards contender. That's why it was playing the festival circuit. I think that it was, they just thought that it was going to be a stronger movie than it was, and I ended up definitely feeling that way about it as I was watching it.
Yeah, I was also, I would say, definitely a little disappointed by this movie. I think I expected to like it a lot more than I did. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 as well. And for me, a big part of that is that, yes, it does very well on certain things from a kind of accuracy standpoint. But the vibe, just as we've said before, just really didn't feel right. It very much didn't feel medieval to me. And, I mean, hey, maybe they should hire a historical consultant. Give me a call, dude. I will consult on your future movie to say this never would have happened in the Middle Ages.
Right, so I'm going to be a little bit more harsh than you guys. I genuinely thought this movie was okay, and I was watching it, I was enjoying it. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5, and I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 because, one, it's the only movie or TV show that I have ever fallen asleep for while recording this podcast. Now, to let people in, I'm not the kind of person to fall asleep. It's not because the movie was necessarily that boring. There's a 5-hour time difference between myself and Sarah, so when she's finished work and we're watching it at 7 o'clock her time, it's 12 o'clock my time when we're starting. So we would have been finishing this movie at 2:30. But I regularly record podcasts at 2:30 in the morning, and I'm still wide awake for them. So for me to fall asleep at the end of it is not a good sign for me. And that would still maybe have left it with a 3 out of 5. But this movie suffers from one thing that I hate in movies, and it is where they dull the colors to make it seem depressing and sad and dark.
This movie was very gray.
So
now that you say that, I realize that.
And it drives me insane. There's no reason to do it. If somebody comes in wearing a red dress, I shouldn't be seeing a dark maroon dress.
Yeah.
And have people referring to it as red. And this movie is 100% of the scenes have that dulling done to the thing, and I hate it. I don't see why it's done in any movie, except to give a pallor of depression over the movie or something.
They didn't discover color yet in the Middle Ages.
But that's what they're basically implying, is that apples weren't green and red back then. They were off grey and slightly darker off grey. It's a weird thing that they do, and it happens in a lot of these medieval type movies. They do it. This is really inside baseball. I can tell the director of Game of Thrones episodes by the first 3 seconds of the show, because they do it in some Game of Thrones episodes where they color matte everything down and fade it down, and straight out I'll be able to go, oh, that's X, Y, and Z, right? And it really gets to me. And anytime I see it in a movie, I just go, right, I'm taking a point off for that. There's no reason to do it. Sarah, you remember, none of our listeners, or maybe 4 or 5 of our listeners, heard the pilot episode we did for this.
The as yet not officially released pilot episode on the movie.
Pilot
Black
episode.
Death.
We won't say what the movie.
You can cut it out.
Well, we will. No, we will. We'll say what it is. It was the movie Black Death. and that movie has it in every single scene
Yeah.
as well. Where the grass is grey.
It's so bad.
It's like it's a color movie and it's a black, but it might as well be a black and white movie. And I hate it, and I'm taking a point off every time I see it. So this would have been a 3 out of 5, but I'm taking that off for it because there's no reason for grass to be a kind of a dull brown color in this movie. So 2 out of 5 for me, and I kind of drifted off to sleep a little bit. And also, this is going to sound terrible because I know Tracy loves him. I don't think Chris Pine is a very good dramatic actor for a movie like this. And
I think it depends on the material sometimes, and I think also again, he's not someone that's done period pieces before, so that
he didn't feel like Robert the Bruce to me, I guess.
Yeah,
I think it works really well in Hell or High Water because he's playing what would be a blue-eyed American boy.
Yeah.
I think it works really badly in something like A Wrinkle of Time, where he's meant to be playing the older, loving, caring father figure. And I just can't get over the fact that he's the beautiful blue-eyed boy. And I think maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's just too handsome. There are some people that you just can't get over that mark. And I think with me, Chris Pine is one of them, where I just don't think I'll ever take him seriously as a dramatic actor.
The other thing, by the way, related to your color issue with this movie that I wanted to note is that at least on my TV, this was the quietest thing I have ever watched.
Oh no, when there was that opening scene and it was all the men congregating around
Whispering.
and like I said, the rotating camera work, I swear to God, I keep my TV on maybe 15 and I had to amp it up to 40. I was like, I have no idea.
This is the first time I had
saying.
turned my TV up to its highest possible volume, which made it sound normal during the action scenes, and I still had no idea what was going on during half of the non-action scenes.
I turned on the closed captions because I wasn't sure that I was hearing the dialogue. I was I'm not sure what's going on right now.
The exact same thing happened to me, and the worst thing about it is that I don't know if this happens with American Netflix. Netflix?
Is that the porn parody of Netflix?
Yeah, it might be Netflix. But in Irish Netflix, it automatically plays a trailer at the end of every movie. So I was watching it and I had it turned up to 67 or whatever it is, the highest volume on my TV is. And next minute it starts blasting out this thing for an anime that I've never watched an anime on my Netflix. And yet it's blasting out this thing. I think maybe it's because I watched Terrace House. It's blasting out, because you watched X, you might enjoy Castlevania. And it was just shouting at me. It was my eardrums nearly burst. And I was worried about waking up my neighbors. That's how
woke you up
so,
at least.
Yeah, it was a weirdly mixed audio and edited sound in this movie.
Yeah, somebody from Netflix needs to work on that.
True, but we should finish up and call it a day there. So, Sarah, would you like to talk to our
Of course.
listeners?
So if you enjoyed our podcast today, we would love if you could rate and review us on iTunes/Apple Podcasts, as well as subscribe. We are available on iTunes/Apple Podcasts, as well as on various other podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and I think at this point pretty much anything we can think of, but if we've missed any, do let us know. We would love to have people join our Facebook group to interact with us, as well as to follow us on Twitter at Media-eval. If you have any questions for us or suggestions for future movies or anything else, we encourage you to send us an email at media.evalpod@gmail.com. So that's media.evalpod@gmail.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and wherever else at Sarah If Decker. And Ollie, they can find you other places as well.
Yeah, you can find me. You can find me on my other podcast, which I do with my best friend Emily. It's called Best Acquaintances, and it's a great podcast where we just talk to people that we've met on the internet, and that's how I met Sarah and how I've met Tracy before. If you want to just find me on Facebook, I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Media-eval. You won't actually be talking to me, but technically that's officially my thing. Or at Ollie and Emily. Either way, you're not going to get much chat out of me because I don't know how Twitter works. Tracy, where can people find you if they want to find out more about your love for the Austen verse?
So like Ollie said, I have an episode of Best Acquaintances that people can listen to if they want to hear me like going on about Jane Austen for like 45 minutes.
It's a great episode.
But yeah, thank you. And I'm also in the Facebook groups for Best Acquaintances and Media-eval. The Media-eval Facebook group and both groups are just so much fun. I love the people there. It's really fun just being able to be like, I'm watching Merlin, what's going on? And so I definitely recommend like going to those groups and checking them out. And if anyone wants to talk to me there, it's a great place.
Perfect.
So
Sarah, what movie? Wait, maybe I've never done this before. Tracy, what movie do you think we should do next week?
Oh God, when you said Black Death before, is that the weird movie with like Eddie Redmayne and Sean Bean?
Yep.
Oh God, I love Eddie Redmayne, and I haven't brought myself to watch that movie.
Oh, it's so bad.
Well,
You'll hate Eddie Redmayne by the end of it.
You will hate it. He's doing his whisper talk, random shout thing,
And he's an
it's
asshole
Oh,
who hates
and
women.
he's a twat. But Sean Bean, does get to have a pretty cool death.
When you guys covered,
Spoiler.
when you guys covered the older Three Musketeers, I saw that it was the older Three Musketeers, but I can't remember what year it was, but there was a recent Three Musketeers with
Steampunk Three
2011.
Musketeers.
yeah, with like Christoph Waltz and like Orlando Bloom and like all these like great people, and I was like, why does this movie have so many people I like in it, and why do I have to go see it? And it was terrible. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Fine. Sarah, that's what we'll do for next week.
All right, we're going to do the 2011 Three Musketeers.
We're going to 2011.
I'm
so
sorry.
sorry.
Cheers, sorry.
I am very excited to watch
Ray
this movie.
Stevenson. and
They're in
Christoph
fucking
Waltz.
Venice.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
wow. Okay, sorry, never mind. Just we can keep going. I just looked up something about the summary for this movie.
About the what?
I just was looking up the movie and I just saw the beginning of the summary, to which my answer is fucking what?
Oh yeah. It's a steampunk movie.
Can I just
Sarah.
read? We can cut this out, but I just want to read the opening sentence of the plot of this movie. In Venice, the musketeers Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, with the help of Milady de Winter, steal airship blueprints made by Leonardo da Vinci. However, they are betrayed by Milady, who incapacitates them and sells the blueprints to the Duke of Buckingham.
That's exactly what this movie
What?
is about.
Why?
I can't
How?
believe I went to see that movie in theaters.
Parkour, Sarah.
Just like in King Arthur, Legend of the Sword.
Which I actually have sitting next to me
Exactly.
because I just got it from my library.
Oh,
'Cause
it's so bad. We've recorded that episode already.
I've heard like
We've already
such
that-
mixed
that's an
things.
episode
I've
coming
heard
out.
like some people that are like, no, like it's really good because like it doesn't take itself seriously, and I've heard like, no, it's really terrible. Don't watch it. So I'm curious.
It's really bad. It is also another movie that hates women like
Oh,
more than
God.
anything else I've seen.
That's not surprising
it's,
because Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes just fridges the shit out of Irene Adler.
Ugh.
So,
I haven't seen that.
The
Yeah.
second one, yeah, she's the best bit
and then
of
in the
first one.
second movie, like they obviously, like Rachel McAdams obviously had a scheduling conflict, and she's in it for 5 minutes and dies.
Oh God.
In the most
Yeah.
anticlimactic
Oh
way ever.
no. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's all about him getting revenge. It's so
Yeah, so Tracy, if you recall the ifft Decker test from previous episodes, King Arthur: Legend of the Sword is the movie for which I invented it. It does not pass.
that is, it's literally
Oh,
why she
God.
invented it, and it's such a. I can't even. But do you know what the weird thing about it is? I can see why. The people who are telling you it's
Yeah.
actually not bad. It's fun. It's bad.
Yeah,
like,
no,
don't
it's bad.
get me wrong, it's bad. But I can get what it is. Like it is done with a joyful lack of caring for continuity, any sort of attempt at historical
They
accuracy.
certainly do not care about that now.
Any sort of attempt at logic. Yeah, it's just. And the worst thing to do is to kill off. Like they make Uther, Eric Bana plays Uther, and he's cool, charismatic Eric Bana, and then they kill him off like really quickly. You're like, damn, now I have to watch Charlie.
Oh god,
Hunnam.
yeah, he's like a block of wood sometimes.
It's so bad. And then they're also like, actually, as long as we're killing Eric Bana, here are 2 women we can also murder.
Oh god.
Dan, it's so there's 2 women just die like boom
Yep.
boom, and you're like, oh, they had names. Oh,
They're like, there's an it. Nope. Bye.
Including Tracy, and so I don't want to spoil this for you too much because you're gonna watch it this evening maybe. Morgana's in it, and let's just say, you might not make it.
So sad.
I just love like crucial figure of like Arthurian legend, and it's like, she doesn't matter. Like,
no,
the
sorry.
actress
What
who
I mean
plays,
is,
Katie
as in
McGrath.
the actress who
jeez.
plays Katie McGrath.
Yeah, it's Morgana from Merlin, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Morgana! I'm so happy! And then it's like,
my
nope,
God.
there she goes.
The 2 of us were so excited. Oh, it's Morgana's in.
No.
Oh,
Bye.
oh.
That's horrible.
Okay, all right. We better
Yes.
call this to an end. Tracy, thank you so much for coming on. Sarah, always a pleasure.
No problem. Thank you
Yeah,
for
Tracy,
having
thank
me.
you so much for coming. Ollie, delight to record with you as always.
And as we said, we've let our guest pick our episode, and I'm going to call that feature every time we have guests now, Pick Our Poison. And that's what we're going to watch. So goodbye, everybody. And, enjoy this sweet-ass Outlaw King tune that I'm going to play over the top of this.